Good afternoon again. So I thought that maybe it's a good time, a proper time, to recap, to again discuss in very, very short terms, in concise matter, how I see the political situation, or at least not the political situation is not a good definition. I would say the political background and the power struggles that brought humanity to the brink of collapse. And it's something I wouldn't say I will not going to think anything new at all. I haven't already discussed those things even in the YouTube stage, and of course many times they have been discussed in the previous stages: Twitter, Facebook, Evernote, and my blog, Gmail. But even though it's not new, even in the YouTube stage, I know that people, sometimes they don't bother to watch old videos, even I think that they should. But for such an important thing, such an important matter, I think it deserves from time to time to just to get a quick refresh, just because it is so important. So I'm going to just make a quick overview of the power struggles and the political situation that brought us to where we are. And it will be really an oversimplified overview, because first because I've discussed the details of as far as I can tell. I don't know everything, and nobody knows like every minute detail. It's not even that important, but I'll do very concise overview, because the details were already discussed in the past, and they are not that important. We just need to understand like that everybody will be like they know that everyone, they just want to know, will know why humanity is in such in dire straits. First of all, let's start with the fact that there is since ancient times, probably, there was an intermittent connection between the Homo sapiens, people of the people of the earth that belong to Homo sapiens species, to another human-like species that belongs to another planet. Now, I mentioned the fact that we were discussing Homo sapiens because Homo sapiens were not the only humans or pseudo-humans or hominids or whatever, you understand what I talk about, what I speak about, that inhabited the earth. And this is already, even as part of like the regular, consensus science of humankind, it's an established fact that there were other species as well. So, and there were many additional species that the current scientific studies of the humankind is not aware of, or does not publicly admit of their existence. And it's not that big of a surprise, because once you've already understood that, you are not the only. It's already established as far as the consensus science that there were times in Earth that up to seven hominids or human-like species, including Homo sapiens, dwelled on the face of the earth on parallel, like at the same time. So, once you already understood that, it's not that big of a deal to understand that in the, more like distant past, there were other species as well. So but let's speak about Homo sapiens. So they had an intermittent connection with another human-like species that is technologically not more advanced than humans, not in the past and not now, and that belongs to another planet. This planet is most probably Venus, which is probably not what people speak about. Like it's probably far from the image that since the 1950s science, like consensus science, like to portray it like as hell with 90% atmospheres pressure of 90 atmospheres on the ground, and maybe 500 Celsius, and all those bullshit stats that were that were established during the 1950s in a very questionable process that I've already discussed in the past, and I'm almost 100% certain that the public knowledge around, about Venus is misleading and it's just a plain simple conspiracy. But even if it's not Venus, it could be another place, because the connection is manifested, by the usage of gateways. I don't know exactly how they work. I've never seen it I've never seen one of these in my own eyes. I know that there are several of these on Earth and in the solar system. They were not created by humans, by Homo sapiens, neither by the Venusians. They were created by other species, because you already, you already understand that if there are two planets that are so close, inhabit life, so there are much more than two, and of course there are much more than two, and there are cultures much more ancient than two of these, and one of those ancient cultures, really ancient cultures, created the gates. Now you might say, okay, these gates are only hypothetical. You say yourself that you haven't seen one of them in your own eyes, and we don't even know if it's possible. According to the laws of physics, wormholes and stargates are things from science fiction. So how do we know? Do we know that it's even possible? So I will say the following: just watch the channel that this video is published in, my own YouTube channel, Noam David 100 in YouTube, and you can see. If you only use your brain, and if you have some kind of analytical tools in your possession, and analytical background and knowledge of physics, just by this you can positively know, 100%, you can be 100% certain that particle physics, as it is currently known by humankind, is completely wrong. I myself have published enough videos in this channel alone, to defy particle physics and to defy the basic understanding of reality that humankind currently possess. That's a fact. It's a positive fact. So, no, you don't. Humanity is far from understanding the cosmos, and they are always updating the models of the cosmos, both cosmological models and the microscopic models. And it's fine. It's the way science works. You already, you start with the basic. Earth, fire, wind, and water, or whatever, and you update, and then you start. And you update the models, and initially you think that the Earth is placed on a turtle or elephants or whatever, and then you have the issue of a sphere and celestial bodies that are partly mystical and partly physical, and the Earth is in the middle, and then you think, okay, the Earth is not in the middle, actually the Sun is in the middle, but then you understand, okay, the Sun is just one star among many, because there is a big galaxy, but then you understand, okay, the galaxy is actually just one of many other galaxies. So the model is updated, but the current model is completely wrong, and this could be proved just by watching this channel alone. Particle physics is completely wrong, and this is a fact that was demonstrated here several times. More specifically, it was demonstrated that microscopic entities can cooperate with each other and can actually describe phenomenon that are in the atomic level or even in the subatomic level, which means that they can actually sense. To say that they watch this phenomenon is kind of like a misnomer, but they in a sense these phenomenon and describe it, which defy particle physics, or they have the ability not to sense the phenomenon but to transmit the information regarding the phenomenon from other sources of intellect or wisdom, and which also defy particle physics. And this was demonstrated many, many times. It's not the only phenomenon that defies particle physics and physics in general that I've showed you in this channel alone. So yeah, we don't know anything. everything. But what you do know is the fact that there was an intermittent connection. Now, the intermittent connection was probably due to, the fact that it was intermittent was probably due to the fact that the gates, they are bidirectional. They are not always open, but they are bidirectional. But in order for creatures to come from Venus here, it's almost impossible for them to do it without the guidance of like slave owners or slave traders from Earth that are they conducted raids or slave owning raids in the other planet. And I said I'm not 100% sure that it's Venus, but I have a lot of strong reasons to believe that it's Venus, and I've already spoken about it in the past. There are several good reasons why it's probably Venus, but it doesn't have to be, because it's the method of transmutation is something that is beyond my understanding of physics and beyond the physical understanding of any person that is part of the humanity. So. It could potentially it could be another planet. In another star system. It's unlikely. It's probably Venus, and I've spoken about it in the past many times. But I cannot be sure that it's Venus until I am actually myself passing the gate and conducting experiment in like beyond the portal, which is something that I've never done in my life, and I've never even seen the portal. I have. Also, like deductions of how, of its properties, but these are, it's important deductions, but it's not empirical evidence that I personally watched with my eyes. And of course, I've never stepped in the other place. In order to actually verify that it's Venus and not another planet, I need to actually be there and like pass the portal and conduct like basic experiments. Or not basic, I don't know. Also, some not very complicated actually, but several experiments that could actually give me strong, supply me with strong empirical evidence of where am I exactly, and probably could determine the fact that it is Venus and not another place. But until I've done that, I cannot be sure. I cannot be certain. I have strong reasons to believe it's Venus, and I've spoken about it in the past. Both because of the history of the scientific understanding of Venus and the conspiracies on the matter that were for sure rose during the 1950s, and also the nature of Venus as it is known by science since hundreds of years, specifically its physical dimension and the fact that it's covered with clouds and many other things. But let's not. But it might be another place. It might be for some. I don't know. Maybe even a moon in this solar system. Even though it's very improbable, since all the moons, every moon that we know of that exists in this solar system is very, very cold, extremely cold. So we don't know of any warm moon in this solar system. So it's probably either Venus or a planet or a moon in another solar system. And from these two options, the options of Venus is much more probable. But I'm not 100% certain. Again, there is still a slim chance of a moon that is actually warm within this solar system given physical conditions that I'm not aware of, or maybe another place. Anyway, it was not. The people in Venus or whatever, let's call the place Venus. Even though we are not certain that it's actually Venus. So the people in Venus could not pass the gate by themselves, not because they lacked the physical ability, but because they didn't have the initiative and the logistical abilities, and they didn't have governments that. Even humans had pretty strong governments even 2,000 years ago. Even 3,000 years ago, they were still already empires like the Babylonian Empire, the Assyrian Empire, and of course later the Hellenistic Empire, and a little bit later the Roman Empire, and even before that the Roman Republic. That I mean, all these entities had considerable logistical and like managerial capabilities. That such capabilities were entirely not in the possession of the other people, and so in order for transition of humans from one, or pseudo-humans from one place to another, a kind of government, needed to exist, and such thing only existed here on Earth. And the knowledge of the gate on its very whereabouts was kept like a secret. I mean, so not every government throughout history were actually, they knew about it and cared about it at all. I mean, it was some kind, and of course that until very late in history, the idea of another planet was actually something that was not, I mean, people did not understand the issue as I mean, until very late in history, even people that knew about the issue did not like conceptualize it as a passage between worlds, but as like a passage between places, because the idea of worlds and planets is a kind of relatively new. Even though it's not, I mean, people knew about planets since ancient times, just as dots in the sky that you can track its movement. And actually, one of the most famous planets was always Venus, because its status as a morning star and the evening star. But the connection between stars or like moving stars or planets and actual reality of like places that people can like actually live in is something pretty modern. I mean, it's probably started like in the 17th or 18th centuries with the literature of like Gulliver Travels or Sinbad and things like that. And of course it gained momentum with more and more like telescopic discoveries that actually gave substance to the idea that the places that the dots in the sky that were known to humanity since like ancient times, or places that people can actually stand in. Anyway, let's jump to the 20th century, and let's make it very simple. Israelis, since before the state of Israel was established, like I mean Zionists throughout the 20th century, they like to do. I mean, they had the capability of doing such raids and enslaving creatures, and it was actually easy for them because they had a superior technology. And I mean, people on the other side, they don't have the technology that is comparable to that of humans here, so it was easy to actually grab them, and they actually, I mean, it was easy to tempt them. Sexual relations are possible but are not recommended because of issues that I myself I do not understand. I myself, I'm not Homo sapiens. I'm not Venusian. I belong to a third species. And if you accept the fact that there are two species, I mean, shouldn't be that much of a surprise to you to accept the fact that there is also a third one, and probably many more. I have no problem of like no physical problem of having sexual relationships with both women of like that belong to the Homo sapiens species and women that belong to the other, let's call them Venusian species. Okay, and I've actually done it. I mean, in my life with both species, but but I know that there is some kind of an issue, a medical issue of maybe not of all kinds of sex. I don't know, because I mean, under the term sexual relationship, I mean, there are several kind of acts, and this could be actually extrapolated to even like also kind of like physical actions that, I mean, some would even describe like a hug as like people, like men and women or whatever, that hug each other as like that they participate in kind of a sexual relation. So, and hugging is not a problem for certain. So, but I mean, surely like let's say a simple vaginal um, um, sexual intercourse is medically problematic for reasons that I admit that I do not understand, because no one ever told me, in plain words. It's all it's a secret, and I don't know have any first-hand knowledge, because again I myself I've had sexual relationships with both women of that kind, of the other kind, and I didn't have problems. But I know that there is this problem here. And it was probably, probably it's kind of a problem that people like of both species. I mean, once they discover that they don't like. I mean, they prefer not to mess with that. Even though there are always exceptions, as you know, people. I mean, when it comes to sexual relationships, people. I mean, humans in general, and it's probably also true to the people of the other planet, which are probably very similar in that aspect. That they tend to do stupid. Like they tend to conduct in very stupid and irrational behaviors. I mean, it's not a secret. I mean, humans are engage in all kind of sexual relations with unprotected sexual relations with strangers, and many times, and it's not something new actually. Sexual disease is not something new. I mean, AIDS is probably today the best known sexual disease, transmitted disease, at least since the 1990s. It was started in the 1980s, but initially for a decade or so it was kind of a secret. But I mean, sexual diseases is something that predates AIDS by many thousands of years, and people in all over history, I mean, dealt with sexually transmitted diseases, and it was actually a huge issue. I mean, in the European Middle Ages, and not AIDS, but other sexual transmitted diseases, and it was also an issue in the 19th century, in the Victorian era, where people used to have. Many men used to, be very prudent, in their domestic sphere, but prostitution, was very common. So, you understand that people humans tend to do stupid things with regards to sexual relationships. So, it's the same is true for interspecies sexual relationships between Homo sapiens and Venusians. It's something that was done in the past, and it's still done today with with very bad results. But it doesn't some people are stupid enough or crazy enough to continue, or they think that they have a way to cure themselves. So and the fact that it's all a secret also. It's a good farming ground, it's a fertile ground for all sort of irrational or pseudo-scientific beliefs regarding how you can be cured from it, or can be immune from it, or all sorts of stupidity, stupid ideas. I mean, the only fact that I know for certain is that I myself is immune from those issues, and this is probably because according to the definitions of human beings, I'm probably, some would say that I'm not even alive. So, and probably the disease or the medical condition that is related to sexual intercourse between the species is probably something to do with living creatures, like germs, or I don't know, viruses. And since I am not alive by at least some of your definitions, please probably give me the immunity to this issue, or perhaps another a very interrelated issue is the fact that I have, as you've seen in your own eyes many times during just by watching the channel, I have my blood and my semen, probably all my body is infested, with billions of entities that I call neros, and they are in some way they can be seen as comparable to white blood cells, to your to the entities that are actually they are the agents of your of the Homo sapiens immune system. And this is something that I've discussed in detail, and this is the main issue of the main subject of this channel is the neros, and what can be done without them, because they can actually live outside my body, and they can perform all sorts of interesting things outside my body, and this was demonstrated many times, and this is actually the main subject, like what can you do with the neurons outside my body, but they also act inside my body. There are billions of them inside my body, and they do things that are comparable to what the white blood cells are doing in your own bodies, like in the Homo sapiens body, which is to eliminate threats, like biological threats. And this could also be like a reason why I don't have this issue. But the fact that sexual relationship is something dangerous between the two species does not mean that slavery is not something that was actually done in large scales specifically by the Israelis, but of course that they have accomplices in other places in this world. It's stupid to think that the Israelis can act alone. It's a ridiculous little garbage state that is filled with garbage people and pedophiles and scumbags and perverts and all sorts of like maniacs, and they can do anything by themselves. This country does not produce anything by itself, almost anything at all. They depend on other countries for everything. Not only they do not only depend on the United States. Of course, they depend heavily on the United States, but not only on the United States. They depend on. They don't have anything here. They don't produce anything. They never produce enough food to feed themselves. They always dependent on imports of food, but not only food, but of energy, of gas, of anything. Of course, any kind of machinery, any kind of industrial tools. Everything is imported in Israel. And as you know, it's not a place that is known for like good relations with its neighbors. So the constant, mostly manufactured, but nevertheless the constant state of conflict is also something that makes Israel depends heavily on other countries. Initially, it was those countries was the UK and France and Germany, but as you all know, since the 1970s. Its main supporter with regards to weapon systems and diplomatic support in the United Nations is the United States of America. So they couldn't. It wasn't possible for them to actually do all this ridiculous stuff those crimes without support of international strong powers, and this issue. And tells a long history of scandals that I've discussed in the past, and I don't want to repeat myself too much. I will just say that since very early in the formation of the States of Israel, and the intelligence services of Israel were populated by pedophiles and homosexuals. This is something that is probably not not just limited to Israel. It was probably something that was that they shared with other Western states, specifically the United States, England, Germany, and strong states that are part of NATO. And this could have been the reason for this phenomenon is probably it's not one reason. It's a complicated phenomenon. And probably, I would say that, to be fair, probably, it had some kind of rationale behind it. Probably, it's not only for bad reasons. Maybe there were actually, at least on the surface levels, good reasons for why this kind of system was enacted in the first place. Like why intelligence services in the West, and particularly in Israel, but not only in Israel, were populated with pedophiles and homosexuals. And there is some logic behind it. I would grant him that. It's not entirely illogical. But it turned out, I think, at least according to my view, it soured greatly. It turned out to be much, to have very bad results, and certainly in the long term, but also in the short term. And the worst place in the world by far with regards to the intelligence systems and the scumbags that populate it is the state of Israel. And I've spoken about it a lot in the past, and I don't want to repeat myself, because otherwise this video will be many hours long. But Israel is the worst state in the world, and the intelligence services of Israel are, they contain the worst scumbags in the world. Like, they're really the worst of the worst. People of the, you cannot, the rock bottom, the bottom of the barrel, the scum of the earth. Anyway, they one of their main characteristics is that they like to pretend that they are not gay and that they are actually heterosexual, but not only heterosexual, but heteronormative, meaning that they like to have like allegedly normal families. And this is something that was not only, of course it was true since the 1950s, but it's still true today, even though today we allegedly live like in a very tolerant world, and specifically in the West, and specifically in Israel as a champion, as presumably a champion of LGBTQ whatever rights. Still the fact is that many of the people that live in Israel that are actually belong to the LGBTQ definition, many of them actually like to pretend that they are completely heteronormative and live with normal, like old-style families with a wife and a dog and children, and that's a fact. That's just a fact. And it was always like that, and it's still like that today. So the people, those people thought to themselves, okay, in order to facilitate this show, what we need is actually women that will, they will accept the fact that they don't have any sexual life, because we are not going to have sexual relations with them, because we are not attracted to them, and they need to be our slaves and raise our children and pretend that it's a heteronormative family. But how can we actually, where can we get such women? And voila, they can get it. Only thing that they need to do is just to resume the slave trade, the Venusian slave trade. What's better than that? So there was a question of what to do with the males in Venus, because there were already also males in there, but the question was solved very quickly, because there were actually few males in there, because several reasons that I don't know everything about it. I don't know much about the cultural and like the state of the civilization over there. I do know that there is disparity between males and females, maybe because it's just a biological characteristic. It's not necessarily true for all species that, males and females are born in the same ratio. Actually, even for Homo sapiens, actually males are more common. Like I think 51 or 52% of life bases are bases of males, even though throughout history, maybe just until this now, but throughout all history, there were more females than males, because males, they tended to kill each other. So, and to die in accidents, or just to die, much quicker than the females. So throughout history, the population of females were actually significantly larger than that of males, even though more babies are born male than female. So I don't know what's the statistics in the other place. Maybe males are not born very commonly, or maybe they like to kill each other. I don't know. We shouldn't portray them as saints. The fact that they are slaves for humans, that doesn't make them like saints. By their own, they might be very, very like violent civilization, and maybe they just like to kill each other, the males. And maybe, I don't know, other reasons that I'm not aware of. Maybe the males are actually weak. I don't know. Perhaps there is a dimorphism that males are actually much weaker than females. It's not a universal constant, even in Earth, that males are always stronger than females. Many times it's the other way around. So maybe males are like very weak, so they weren't like they were not coveted merchandise from the point of view of the Israelis. And I know for certain that males did were captured and brought to Israel, and they used here, of course, as slaves, and they were treated as subhuman entities. And many times Israelis literally ate them. And why this cannibalism took place is the subject of other videos, and I don't want to get into it. But there is also a cannibalism. Yeah, I mean, you think that it's all of this is kind of like a horror story, but it's actually reality. This is history. This is part of the history of mankind, specifically in the 20th century, in the 21st century. Yes, it is. They actually ate them. Not metaphorically, but just like cook them and put them on a plate. Yes. It's a fact. It's not a joke and it's not a metaphor. They actually ate the males. And soon, I mean, there were just no more males and only females. And and so they used the females as slaves, and they still use those females as slaves. Specifically, they are used inside the intelligence community for purpose of pretending, of creating the illusion of normative, heteronormative families for the pedophiles and homosexuals that are very common inside the intelligence community and in the defense community in general, and in Israel in general. Maybe I should have noted that many of the people, like the homosexual and the pedophiles that are part of the Israeli intelligence and defense community, were not born in Israel, but were actually born on other states and were delivered here, I mean, by like international kind of like a pedophile network of inside the Western world that pedophile exchange. It's a way to transport garbage people from one state to the other, and specifically, I mean, Israel is more in the receiving end of this deal. I mean, historically, because it was created as a garbage state. It's a garbage state. It's a trash can state. Now, it was actually at a certain time. I mean, like at a certain point in Israel discovered that they discovered my existence, and they understood that I am actually comparable to a male, to biology comparable to male of the Venusian species in a way that I'm not a male of the species. More specifically, my body is like full of the material, of the neuromaterial that this is something that is not, by all means, this is not a characteristic of Venusians in general and not of Venusian males. And this is something that the Israelis knew very well. They didn't understood the nature of neros because, I mean, who does? I mean, I also am just starting to study it, and they couldn't like perform very like an open research on the matter. Of course, they can, and they did gave the material to real scientists, not like myself, but real Israeli scientists. But they had many limitations because they couldn't perform open research. So it was all done like in the shadow. So I mean, the scientific study, as you understand, when it's conducted in the shadow or in the darkness, it's not the best kind of scientific study. It's not peer reviewed, and it's like heavily influenced by the political people that manage the whole the research. There is a reason why universities are by nature open, and modern research is always peer reviewed. I mean, when it's done in the darkness, it's not really research. But in any case, the Israelis understood very well that I'm not my nature is different from those of Venusians, but they understood that I could potentially be simply that I can have children with the Venusians, and this is something that they really did not like. I mean, they wanted that to happen only by if they supervise the whole ID, and if the children are born under their protection and under their supervision to be used as future slaves. This is the only way that they wanted that the Israelis wanted to allow it to happen. Yes, that's the way. They wanted to have slaves, new generations of slaves. Also, it should be said here, and a very important point, that maybe I should have mentioned earlier that another interesting, I mean, I would say in a very like grim note, another crime of the Israelis that they like to eat the eggs of the Venusian woman for reasons that I actually don't know for now. Maybe it gave them some kind of, I don't know. I still don't know actually. I don't know why, but they did it. And yeah, and according to the logic, I mean, they didn't need the eggs. The eggs, I mean, the menstrual cycle, to put it bluntly. Same kind of eggs that Homo sapiens females possess. Also, the evolution's women possess it, and they just eat it. As disgusting as it might sound, that's what the Israelis like to do. Yes, specifically in the Nigerian community, and it's all extremely disgusting and sinful, but that's the way it is. This is reality. And specifically, I would say that regarding myself, they used me as a slave all my life, and what they want to keep doing is just to keep using me as a slave, keep taking the neros, my semen or whatever, in any way they can, they take it from me because they know that this could be used for all sorts of things, and to create influence on the biology of the Venusians, the female Venusians that are commonly used as slaves by the Israeli people. So they wanted to continue, and they want me to be a slave, to be poor, to be an underhuman, and for that purpose, they torture me in any possible way, physical or mental or whatever. They take my money from me, they take my children from me, they take everything from me, because according to their view, I was born to be their own slave, and I should never speak, nobody should know about my existence, and I should be as poor as possible and dependent as possible, and just say thank you that thanks to the Israelis that they allow me to actually breathe, or live in the most basic standard of living that is possible. So yes, this is the political situation, and my personal situation is part of the political situation, and this is why asteroids are on the way to destroy large parts of Earth. But even before that, the Earth is doomed by sun flares and radioactive rays, and of course, we should also mention my favorite plague, because my personal connection to the biological phenomenon of the water snakes and the worms that infest the earth, and all the related microbial life that's already, I think, according to my estimation, is taking roots in earth, and charging the water reservoirs, the Kinneret, the aquifers, with more like diverse new kind of living forms, and of course taking roots on the bodies of the hosts, of the wonderful hosts, Homo sapiens hosts, in this city and the surrounding cities, and of course ultimately all over the world. So this is it.